What's up, everyone? We are back for another episode of What Would Chobra Do, the series where we are following along the 4 Pacific teams attending VCT Champions Seoul. We're taking a quick look each time at what these teams should be looking out for against their upcoming opponents, and then when we do have the time, we will be following along live watch parties on our co-streams to see if we have the right reads and also to see how well the teams can adjust live in the server. Now, all the opening matches have finished, and VCT Pacific, we came out 50-50. We had 2 teams winning their opening matches in DRX and Gen G, which means they are now only 1 step away from making it to playoffs, while 2 teams, FPX and Talon Esports, took a loss in their first match, and they are now 1 step away from elimination, fighting for their tournament life. Now, the winners matches will be happening first, so DRX and Gen G, they'll be coming up very soon, and their next opponents are going to be Fnatic for DRX and Team Heretics for Gen G, 2 EMEA teams. Since those are coming up first, let's take a look at Fnatic and Heretics, their opening matches, and see what we should be looking out for if we were DRX and Gen G. We're actually going to start with Gen G first, and their opponent, Team Heretics. Now, as we take a look at Team Heretics' opening match, we do have to keep in mind that this was against FPX, which is going to require a bit of a, different tone and different pacing. Just because FPX, they play some wonky comps, they get very aggressive, within their compositions, things like that. So it's much more about countering, which I think Heretics did a pretty decent job of. Now, the first map was Abyss, and while there are some things to take away from that Abyss, I'm pretty confident that Gen G is not going to leave it open. But if they do, we can talk about what we noticed from Heretics' Abyss once we're in the live match. But for now, let's focus on the other 2 maps and see how Heretics was fighting up against FPX. Now, we start from the pistol right away, and in the pistol, Team Heretics is going to do something that they never do, I believe, for the rest of the first half, which is just going to be a singular haunt, a fade fake over onto A, while it is a 4-man stack over on B. He's going to throw a little bit of a fake over onto A, and then everybody groups up, but Autumn takes a first shot, nice kill, and he's able to back off. Now, we should also note in that movement that Team Heretics, they actually try to just chase through and see if they can catch him off guard, try to match the pace, get ahead of it, because now they're down in numbers. And here comes the buy round. So now with full rifles, Heretics, what is your go-to default against the bonus? Especially considering that Fun plus Phoenix, their bonus is kind of all over the place, right? You got the Outlaw, you got the Judge, and then you still got some rifles. So it's just going to be, a 2-3 split, but all towards a short. And as soon as they get the first kill, we see them just piling through. Rians immediately throws to Dizzy to follow up through the toxic screen, and they just jump out of their own toxic screen and try to take over. Berlin's going to put a little bit of a stop to it, but overall, just wait, patiently to see if there's a push out. If not, creep up. As soon as you get contact, you're barreling through, knowing that you have the numbers advantage and the weapons advantage. Now, taking a look at round 4. Once again, it's just going to be Team Heretics kind of waiting to see if there's a push out. Now, this is a theme throughout the first half, and I think a big part of it is because of the composition they're playing against, which was kind of newly brought out from FPX. So you've got Autumn over in the Chamber. You've got Life still on the Yoru. I mean, these are both agents that kind of want to push out, abuse their ability to teleport, and then get back out. That's how they're getting information, because otherwise they're just relying on the fade and you have no sentinel. So there's no way to just passively anchor down and wait for the information to come to you. So Team Heretics already has a pretty good understanding of how they want to play against this composition. Now, unfortunately, in round 4, Autumn is going to take a nice shot with the operator just peeking out confidently and gets that kill. But other than that, overall, this pattern of, hey, they have to come out and fish for information, Heretics tries to use this to their advantage quite a bit. Now, it should be noted for about half of this first attacking side, Team Heretics is actually just going to group up on one side of the map. Now, I think part of this is because if you're going to have FPX push out anyway, you could try to wait and fight them, but if you're not meeting them in the right place, you're kind of losing out on time. And while they do have a Yoru who can teleport across the entire map, you should still have the numbers advantage and definitely the util advantage as long as you're not getting picked off by Autumn. So we're gonna see the Mosh lineup over for Garden, and we're gonna see a Prowler as well just to chase them all through, just so you know that you gain all the space up to get into the site here on round 5. Another round where they do have buys, a round where they do have the Thrash, so they're pretty confident. They actually have a nice read and a very good reaction against the TP play coming out from FPX, and that about sums up the round. Now, here's another thing, is that we're going to see Heretics go for a very similar play again. It's going to be a split over on B, both through Hookah and B main. They just did that the last round, FPX went for a bit of a Hail Mary play to catch them off guard. It didn't work, and Heretics is saying, let's do it again, because chances are FPX is going to do the same silly thing twice. Now, they will be correct in that there's no craziness going on, and they actually get the first pick here onto Autumn. It's a nice kill from Boo, and immediately, as soon as they get first contact, there's movement across the entire team. Now, I'm not sure if this was calculated or not, just because Mini Boo is out here with no support. So he's actually going to give the trade away to Life, which kind of stalls things a little bit for Heretics, knowing that they're on even numbers again, and they want some surefire information, which they do get in the form of Life pushing out. Now, seeing as how that wasn't mostly very helpful in that previous round, this time they're just going to full send Mini Boo on a fake for the boom bot. They're going to bounce it through and see if that baits out a reaction from somebody else to push out, right? So you see Team Heretics watching both angles of A to see if that means, you know, how is FPX making sure that they rotate in time? How are they getting us on these retakes? What's going on here? How do they get this information? So you're fishing for that. Unfortunately, a one-way comes out here, which is pretty advantageous here for Life and Autumn. And I believe this round also ends a bit disastrously. Yep, this is the collat round. Autumn gets, you know, a twofer, and that about spells the end of that one. But guess what? We go again. Now, there is no boombot fake, but it's going to be once again the same setup. Wait for a push out both from A short or A main and Showers, and then they're going to try to re-clear. We just saw this earlier, right? Two similar plays done back to back. Now, what I just discussed about the repeated plays is very important, because this is something I noticed from Boo's calling, is that he's willing to risk going for the same play again, especially if it's after a timeout, just to try to catch the opponent off guard. So he's trying to make sure that he can stay one step ahead by sometimes doubling down. Now, a lot of times it's not the identical same play. There's a slight tempo change. There's one extra person watching another angle. You know, there's slight variations to account for any mishaps, but this is something, especially after timeouts, where you imagine that the timeout asked for a very, you know, different play. Maybe you're taking a risk or something like that to catch your opponents off guard. So the opponents, maybe, especially if they get the read, you know, whether they win the round or not, they're going to think, all right, hey, we got the read. So they're going to go back to their defaults. Let's calm down. And then Boo will go for it again. So this is something that Gen G is going to need to be very aware of in this calling battle, right? In this IGL battle and the coaches battle with the timeouts, where they never really count that possibility out. And if anything, in classic Gen G style, maybe go more aggressive to make sure that you get, you know, 100% confident information so you can make the right read from round to round. Now, looking at the defense, this is pretty straightforward, but the real fact of the matter here is it's actually going to differ a little bit from Fnatic, because they also played Bind, and we'll get to that. But Team Heretics, oftentimes what they will do is they'll double up or triple up on Showers. They'll try to set things up, and then it will oftentimes be the Fade. Woot, left to his own devices. He'll try to keep some util, especially in the form of the Prowlers, so he can try to delay. But after that, it's Mini Boo, the Raze, who is going to be going on the rotates. This is important to remember, because there's two things that you can do about this. Either the fact that you can, you know, maybe try to take early pressure on B, force those rotates earlier, then go for a lurk, something like that. You can also just stick around and try to force those Prowlers out of Woot a lot earlier, before the minute mark or right around the 50-second mark, before you have another chance to rotate, just to get that util out of his hands. Or the other thing is that the Fade can only delay 1 point of contact. So let's say people are charging in through here. Let's say you still have a Prowler, you still have Seizes. You're really only going to be able to cover that one side. So if you go for a pinch, right, maybe you smoke off something like a Lamps, and you are going for a pinch over from both sides, Woot isn't going to be able to fight everyone. Now, this I don't think is very good, but it's something to keep in your back pocket just to change the tempo. The reason I don't think it's good is just because a pinch onto Showers, like, it's a lot of investment to make sure it's safe, because you're going to want to make sure you smoke this off, smoke this off, smoke this off, whether you're using, you know, the Brimstone smokes, whatever else it might be, and then you want to make sure somebody is blocking this off. You basically have to make sure that you're not getting caught off guard. And on top of that, it's Woot. I don't think there's really any reason to try to constantly pressure him out of all people. Let's be honest. If you're pressuring someone on Team Heretics, it better be Mini Boo, because so far he has the weakest mental. And I hate to say this, right? I'm not trying to, like, ruin anybody's day, but it is a competition, and just noticeably, Mini-Boo so far has the least experience just kind of taking it in stride. He's very, very hard on himself, and the pressure seems to get to him every now and then. Now, I'm not saying that he like crumbles and he's just out of the game, but if you are targeting anybody, it should probably be Mini-Boo. It definitely shouldn't be Woot, in my opinion. Now, over on Lotus, this is actually a good round to start with right here on round 3, which is going to be their bonus round. Now, there's something interesting to note here because more often than some of the other teams, Heretics will actually like to plant Mini-Boo as the raise over on C Mound, right? So that they have more util to fight B and A site. Now, part of this might be because it's the triple controller composition coming in from FPX, and, you know, trying to util dump here, then you're just going to be out of util while they still have infinite smokes and things like that. That's definitely a consideration, but it is just important to note that, I mean, even on Bind, right, it's Mini-Boo who's kind of going for these rotates. So a bit of a change in what is more common for some other teams that maybe even use, you know, the same exact compositions, and how they view who's taking what map control. Mini-Boo does get a very nice kill here, which helps a lot in maneuvering this default setup. Now, it should be noted that there is another interesting aspect here, because Team Heretics is about to go broke if they lose this round. You know, they won't be on the three-peat round loss money, and then you also had to keep buying up. You're buying up the Odin, so you're down on Econ down here. So what we are looking at is that it's going to be a high-low setup, something that you don't see every day on Lotus, to make sure that they can try to keep the round lead. You're 1 point ahead up top. You want to make sure that you're not losing that early on, especially on defense. It's a nice bonus to have going on with the first half. Now, alas, it doesn't work. If you take a look at the scoreboard, it is tied 2-2. But once again, it's a setup for the raise over on Mound. So they're willing to try to take this over. Now, again, I think a big part of this has to do with the controller comp, right? FPX are much more liberal about putting that early smoke over on Mound to try to counteract your one-ways. So Team Heretics trying to get ahead of it, that's fine. You're also on an eco this round, so trying to get ahead of it with a bit of a curveball, that's fine. But just the fact that if push comes to shove, they are willing to do this, that is important to remember. Now, the other thing here is, I know the Heretics players talked about the role swap, and, you know, they made it sound like kind of hey, I actually like this agent, you actually like this agent, this sounds cool, let's swap. It does make me wonder if they are just trying to make things a bit more smooth for Woot to be the guy where they take control first, and then he's the one who's protecting that space, right? He's the one who's trying to keep priority because he's playing the Omen, and what does Omen usually do on Lotus? He does get taken out in this round, is take control of Rubble and keep a hold of it. So that's the other thing to maybe keep track of in the future maps of, is Woot the guy that they're hoping and relying on to get those multi-kills to really just buy time for the rest of the team, and he can be this wall although he's on his own? Do we just have to set him up? And if that is true, then what does that mean? On Bind, we had a couple different options, but here on Lotus, I mean, the reason Omen does that for almost every team is because it's fairly easier for the Omen to be able to get value out of it. So how do you counteract that, especially if it's a player like Woot? A lot of times, it's in the way that you want to save your util to be able to clear this, right? Especially depending on the composition you play. But you still want to have some value here. So you want to push up, maybe throw paint shells, whatever it can be, just to make them have to respect it and rotate over to C, maybe fill the site, or at least come by and throw some extra util. And that gives you that timing window to make sure that Woot's not getting the full backup that he needs to survive. Now, generally, if the raise wasn't spotted nice and early over on A, or if there at least wasn't a full setup to try to set Woot up on the Omen over on Rubble, it meant the raise was C, and it meant that there was a push out of C Mound for Team Heretics. But in the very last round of the half, they just suddenly just cut all contact, and they say, all right, you come to us. We've got this toxic screen to make sure that we can buy time. It's going to protect the door as well. We've got the nanostorms. We've already stacked C site. We have the turret to watch, and then Mini-Boo's got the showstopper. He can really swivel around. They do something different on the half to see if they can try to tie it up. But I want to go back to an earlier round. This one's round 8. It doesn't really matter which round. But basically, on defense, Heretics has a pretty strong understanding of the whole 50% map control rule. Or the rule of diagonals. So you're going to push out. However, Team Heretics, what they're going to do is put a forward alarm bot to make sure that they're not getting information too late from C-side. It's not entirely free. Now, what Gen G will oftentimes do is that they'll have someone like Meteor who's going to be able to lurk and try to find a timing to look for that. Or they're going to just go for a staggered defense, right, where they go step by step and try to get pickoffs and kills as they're peeking around the corner before the execute happens. Now, Heretics' setup, it's not exactly going to stop the execute, but it will give you the information. So a slightly different tempo of interpretation, but at the end of the day, if it's not this, then for Heretics, oftentimes it's this, where the Raze is camping out over on Mound, and then you are just holding passively in the site on A. Now we go over to the attacking side, and we can take a look at some examples, but I'm pretty sure we could kind of pick any round, and the point would mostly stand true in that Team Heretics isn't really playing the long game on their attacking side, right? It's not about keeping space on a map and then lurking and re-clearing and pushing and pulling across the entire map and basically pushing the enemy all the way back from the line of scrimmage, but more so it's about just getting information and going for a hit. Heretics is a bit more pacey, a bit more decisive, so to speak, in exactly when they're going to make the hit. So this is actually a very similar round that we saw in Bind, where the Fade, although this time it is Boo, is going to go for a haunt just to try to keep them at bay. You're going to get a reaction out of it, and then you immediately rotate and you say, all right, yo, they're pushing out of rubble. That should make the site weaker. Now, unfortunately for them, it is a triple controller composition, and there is just infinite util, and they walk into an absolute grinder of smokes where they're taking a lot of hits. Still get through. You know, Rian's actually makes it all the way through. Rian's had a great series, by the way. Probably the guy to really be watching out for if he's playing that, you know, the same way when he's up against Gen G. The point is that you're playing against a triple controller. It's like they're gonna be able to cycle through their smokes nonstop. This is purely a control type of composition, right? Where they are just able to wait if you try to go for a rush. So you can try to get ahead of it, but you're going to have to make sure that you are confident in your timing and ideally not picking the site where there is a, you know, Astra and a Viper at the same time. Now, how much of this was because specifically they were playing up against FPX? Probably a good chunk. I think Heretics, because the way I see it, they are trying to go for the same goals as Gen G in terms of their style and philosophy. It's just the process is slightly different and the timing's a little bit different. I think that therefore they're pretty well built to try to counter the enemy styles, and obviously FPX having a very unique style, that is a very good way to prep against them. But just by nature, also the fact that Team Heretics very willing to use the neon compositions on a lot of the maps, with Miniboo being an amazing neon, you know, in the world, they're going to be a bit pacier. They're going to be able to just say, hey, we got the first kill, we got the first advantage, let's roll with it, let's, you know, push the snowball down the mountain. That's, I think, the big difference with Gen G. So the one thing I will say is, quite frankly, I think just the base habits and trends, Gen G should still be stronger, right? Gen G's kind of shifted their, you know, overall ideology of the 4-1 default into a faster re-clear style, where they will aggressively re-clear and just push, and they'll take contact to get information. They won't just kind of creep up and say, hey, we got the entrance to B main, like, we're cool now, we'll wait to see if they push up. No, they push up, and if you get a little bit of movement on the other side or you get nothing, you just push out as 4. And oftentimes this is because that Gen G wants to make sure that they can always confidently rotate. So I think that style should work pretty well against Team Heretics' tendencies if we see very similar things as when they played against FPX. But on top of that, the other thing to watch out for is there's probably not any good reason to pick into neon-heavy maps. So, listen, Miniboo, I think, is the one that can get the shakiest, right? Some of the least experience. He's very hard on himself, etc., which I think he's a great player, and he can probably become an even better player with that type of determination to become a great. But we're opponents right now, so I'm just going to say it like it is. Don't give him his comfort role. Like, Woot is the type of guy, Woot and Benji are the type of guys you don't really want to push into willy-nilly, because they will pop off and they'll actually celebrate it and they'll get the whole team hyped up and things like that. Whereas Miniboo, like, don't give him the comfort of the neon where he can actually turn into that hype guy. Make sure that there's some other thing that Miniboo has to be taken care of, whether it's with the Raze and he has to wait for the util setups, things like that, and you can work around it to make sure you target it. The only other thing I would say is there's probably not a good reason to ever pick into a neon-heavy map when you're playing against Heretics. I mean, Miniboo clearly very comfortable on the neon. At the end of the day, whether it's the neon or the Raze, Team Heretics does seem to play around a lot of setting up for Miniboo when it comes down to the attacking. And then on defense, he's kind of on a lot of the rotate duty after the initial clearance. But again, no reason to give this guy extra comfort. In fact, if you're trying to make someone uncomfortable again on Heretics, it's probably got to be Miniboo. So I would hope that that is reflected well in the draft for Gen G, although I'm going to assume that the first ban is going to be Abyss. Now, let's talk about DRX's opponent, Fnatic. Now, before we jump into some examples for Fnatic, I wanted to just talk about the overall style that Fnatic plays, because although they also played against a Chinese team in Bilibili Gaming, I do, and I just say that because, you know, the China teams generally all have very, very distinct styles and firepower and things like that. But I do think there's a lot to take away, because it seems like Fnatic is trying to once again play the most perfect Valorant that they can, which is the style and form that we mostly remember them for in 2023. Now, this year, what's different is that thanks to the strength of ISO, they are utilizing the Euro ISO quite a bit wherever they so choose, and that's going to be a different style than the typical kind of mid-rangey, timing-based, always knowing that I have the upper hand in the war of attrition when it comes to utility, that kind of style. But I would say that the bottom line is that Fnatic seems to be working off of the advantage that they think they have in composition understanding, right? The grasp of Valorant in this matchup against whoever they're playing. So let's take a look at what they did on Bind first against Bilibili. Now, on the defense, a lot of times what's going to happen is that they're going to use, you know, something like a Prowler or a Haunt to set up Durka on the Raze here. And then, as soon as that's over, we see Hero rotating all the way across to the other side. It's just a very, very instant rotate, right? You've set up a strong guy here. You've got a Viper here working off of you know, your own maybe one ways down here. Maybe you got the one way over on Showers, but this counteracts the opponent's toxic screen over on Short. And then that way you can stack B site. And B site has a lot of time to buy, because guess what? We're just gonna put it as smokes. You can have smokes set up like everywhere, right? You can have extra ones here. You can have extra ones here to make sure that you can help take that space early. You can have one for safety here. Maybe some of these are dismisses, and then you bring it back, and then you can buy some time here. You can double up with a gravity well. So the Astra buys a lot of time if necessary. So can the Gecko, and still maybe get the cooldowns back. So it's a very, very intentional default setup that Fnatic plays, where they have the advantage to spend a lot of time stalling you on B, set up a strong setup over on Showers. That gives you priority over the teleporter more or less. And then if need be, you stagger back up. You got 3 people now, and then you still have a lot of utility left. So let's take a look at how things looked against Bilibili in the actual game. Right off the bat, on the pistol, you've got a triple stack over on A. You've got the Astra and Gecko over by B. And guess what's going to happen? They're going to push out, and they say, all right, Durka, this is all you. You've got some 6 shots. We're going to rotate over, and they will just be going over. Now, K-Knight gets a nice kill onto Alpha here, so, you know, things don't go exactly as planned. And something that happened during this game, by the way, starting from the pistol, is that on B site, they just constantly took over Elbow, and that's how they got their retakes, and it always worked out pretty well. There is something I want to talk about there in a little bit, but let's go through a couple more rounds first. Now you're on the anti-eco. The Fade's going to be looking to set you up again. Now Durka does get pushed back, as the Spy Chem is going to force him to just get spotted, and they don't want to spend too much utility, so they go all the way back. That baits in a little bit of a push from a Short, and Fnatic Chronicle gonna be able to clear that. Now a bit of a mishap happens here, where Chronicle is trying to hold on to Lamps a bit too much, perhaps, considering the rest of the team has really all backed off, and they think it's just gonna be a simple plant and kind of leaving the site from Bilibili, and Bilibili pushes through. So it gets a little dicey, but at the end of the day, the default, the idea stays the same. Now, round 4, sometimes it's going to be the Astra and the Fade kind of switching places. And this way, it's still the same idea, where the Astra really, I mean, they can be anywhere, because they can put their stars across the whole map. But this way, now you have double Initiator that gets absolute 100% information over on the B side. You still have ways to delay with the Prowler and the C's. You've got things like the Dizzy and the Mosh. And then you can set up for a play on Showers or a Short as you see fit over on the triple side of A site. Now, this one is an interesting one, because it's round 5, and the overall idea stays the same. You've got this to dismiss or smoke off B main just to hold control of it, maybe get the orb for free. Now, you have the Fade over on A, and you still have a smoke over on the Shower side, but Durka is hanging out in the back site. Now, a big reason for that is because your economy is a little bit mixed right now. You don't have a full buy, but you do have the showstopper. So Durka is purposely waiting here to be able to just launch the showstopper, have the extra leisure when he's back site so he doesn't get picked off immediately as the execute happens, because it's going to be a reactionary showstopper, and try to take them out. Now, this is a good round to talk about the elbow retakes here from Billy. And there's a very good reason that I think this continued to work out pretty well for Fnatic. Let's play it out. All right, the spike gets planted. Billy has noticed in the past couple rounds that Fnatic has preferred to try to at least take elbow control, and that's ruined them a bit. So they're going to try to flash them away. They're going to try to buy time, but you're holding an operator on YZ. It's not feeling great. You do have all 5 people. The plant's already done, and you think you should be able to just back out. The problem with backing out against this composition is that, okay, the Viper is gone, so sure, the toxic screen isn't there anymore, but you still have an Astra. I mean, you know, this time you only have that 1 star, but there's going to be a lot of util there. You still have repeated util that's left over on cooldowns here from the Gecko, and you still have an extra Prowler. So the way that Fnatic's playing this, oh, and what's eventually going to happen is Bo's just going to get a kill, and he's going to get the Cosmic Divide. But the point is that against this composition that usually is going to have more util left over than you, because you're using your util to get in, and they have a very, very systematic way of going through their utility to make sure that they have stuff saved up for the retake. The moment you leave, you actually kind of give them priority. Sure, you could try to spam through. It's not a wall, it smokes, but now they're going to be able to control the reactions they get out of you. And I think that's a big reason why some of these elbow retakes were actually getting to be very good from Fnatic, is that the better way to play against this would have been to actually really just hold on to elbow and try to fight as much as possible in the site, right? I mean, don't greed for it, but I think that's something that Billy had to consider, and if it comes to it, something that DRX is going to have to consider. Now, in round 8, Billy has a pretty good adjustment to try to continue to target Fnatic's B side. And that's the fact that they're just going to use their utility when they can to push through early and then get to the line of scrimmage and then just barrel through. Because here's the problem, again, similar to how you want to kind of hold close on the post plant, is the fact that if you're going for like a long range set play execute, that gives Fnatic so much time to set up extra stars, extra smokes, extra stuns, whatever else it might be, extra blinds, that you will have just wasted your util and now you're behind because they have more. So something to consider here is that it's not a heavy investment, right? It's actually just going to be a smoke here and then the Trailblazer. And this means that you get Garden for free. Like, you get it, right? Because this smoke is meant to prevent them from pushing into Garden or Octagon, whatever you want to call it. And they're going to take control of that. Now, what they do even more is then they just say, hey, we go through. And they flash out of their own Brimstone smoke, and then they just jump into the site. Why? Because if you're waiting at that point and you're just trying to play timers, like, Fnatic won't match you. They will gladly match you on util. So you have to find this timing where you think that our util was just used for this. No, we have to use it further, and we have to make sure we get the advantage when we can. And then they barrel through and they get some good kills. Now, obviously, a Fnatic, very, very strong team, very, very good coaching staff as well, through and through. So what we're going to see here is a timeout comes out from Fnatic. And while, yes, the retakes through elbow were okay relatively here for this map, the adjustment that Fnatic's going to make is they're just going to push out of B. They haven't done that, right? They haven't really used this to push out. They're going to get information of pushing in through showers, and they're going to make the call, and Fnatic just pushes out real strong. Now, K-Knight gets this information, which is very helpful for Billy, but at the end of the day, this is Fnatic making an adjustment to make sure that they get the movement they want from Billy Gaming, right? You're trapping them on the A side. You're going to surround them and then go for a retake on a site where now you already have priority because you're holding both the entrance to showers and the back of site. When the timeout happens, I think more than trying to be like, hey, let's catch him off guard, it's for a team like Fnatic, it's very important to remember, like, what has been the most annoying thing for them? How would we fix that? And then what's the reaction afterwards? Now, as for Lotus, I mean, listen, just don't pick Lotus. If there are maps I'm avoiding against Fnatic, it's going to be Lotus and it's going to be Abyss, right? I don't want to be the first team to find out what they've cooked up on Abyss alongside Anders as their strategic coach. And Lotus, they built Lotus. Everyone's still using it. They're still using it. They're going to be more comfortable than you if you're using the same composition. So I just don't know if you do that. I mean, you look at the way they play, and it's almost kind of boring watching their Lotus because it's just like, it's so systematic and it's so clean, and then you have brilliant players that can hold their own. I mean, look at the way Alfire holds this round. The staggered retreat, like one by one, that this guy is making and getting full value and timing until his teammates can fill the site. Like, it's so well drilled. Just, I don't think it's worth it. I mean, if you have to leave it open, fine, but like, definitely, I mean, I wouldn't, right? And I don't think DRX needs to, quite frankly. So I would just avoid it. Now that would mean there's a risk that you have to play them on a map like Haven against the Yoru ISO. And the problem with the Yoru ISO is that you can plan for it, but everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And Alpha on the ISO is going to be very strong. So yes, there are things to watch out in that composition. Yes, it has weaknesses, and it has a pretty distinct style that you can read into, and a big part of it is that they're going to take space with the Euro, set up the ISO. Now the ISO self-sufficient, then the Euro rotates. That's how they keep map control. So there's a very small timing window where you can try to hit the weaker side and draw out the Euro, and then, you know, still rotate out, things like that. But it's tough. If that so happens, we can talk about it live during the match, but the bottom line is this is a bit of an uphill battle for DRX. I do think there are things that they can try to do to counteract it, and a big part of it is that just understand their composition. If it's your ISO, it's going to be about them using their early utility and then the teleport to make sure that they actually carry more than 50% map control. So how do you counteract that? How do you find that timing before the gate crash happens or while the gate crash happens? But when it comes to some of these maps like Lotus and Bind, it is about their mid-ranginess, right? That the fact that they are going to be able to outlast you on util. So slow creep contact, right? Very Genji style of play is going to be the answer. And then the post plants, don't give them too much space. Make sure that you're set up for a very good staggered retreat, or in fact, just a lot of infighting right inside the site. That's something that you'll have to consider if you're DRX. Well, that's going to be it for this episode. Their matches are happening this week. We'll see if Gen G and DRX can both make the greatness happen and move on to playoffs as the first two teams. But if not, we'll have to come back and look at their next matchups after the lower bracket happens in each of the groups to see who they're facing off in the decider match. As for Paper X and Talent, their matches a couple days later, so we will take some time to review their opponents to make sure that we know exactly what they need to do to survive at VCT Champions Seoul. After watching this, let me know down in the comments below, do you think Gen G and DRX both have a strong chance to move on to playoffs, or is it only going to be one and not the other? And of course, if you enjoyed the video, leaving a like and a comment helps a lot, both for the algorithm and both for my emotions, so I would appreciate that a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back next time, and don't forget to tune into the live stream for the watch parties.